Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello, can you all hear and see me? Yes. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us at our final session of the day. So, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning for some people, wherever you're dialing in from. Um, it's been a real honor to speak to so many incredible people here today. And of course, it's my absolute pleasure to be in conversation with yourself, Simon, Melanie, Malis, and Dipti on why meaningful representation matters and the need for LGBTQ plus leaders to reflect on and explore their own queer leadership journeys. So, some of the topics that we'll cover this afternoon in our panel will include, of course, LGBTQ plus representation, the power of role models, queer leadership, and we'll also touch on what inclusive policy and practice looks like to ensure that we do craft and build more inclusive, equitable, and safer spaces for our LGBTQ plus siblings. So many of you who have listened to me today will be familiar with the fact that I think it's really important that as speakers here, we do share with you who we are, how we self identify, so that you're aware of our own positionality and how our own identities inform this afternoon's conversation. So, for those of you who haven't heard my spiel yet, my name is Dylan. My pronouns are he, him, she, her. I self identify as a South African, white, gender fluid gay man who is an immigrant living here in London. Earlier today it was sunny. Of course, we're back to the rain now. I just had to put in the weather forecast, weather report there. And I've, of course, been privileged enough to have been university educated and also have English as my native tongue. So, Melanie, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody?
Certainly. Hello, I'm Melanie Wolfenden, and thanks for the warm welcome, Dylan. And I'm excited to join you this afternoon. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as a practicing Christian, white, English, a bi woman with trans history, and I'm also university educated, so very privileged. I currently work as a technical architect for InnoApps, and I've been helping customers with their Oracle journey for about 18 years. Prior to joining InnoApps in February this year, I worked for a Stonewall Top 100 employer, leading their LGBTQ network across EMEA and globally for about 6 years. As I mentioned, I'm now working for InnoApps, which is an Oracle-only partner. So it has about 500 employees, and compared to the 130,000 employees with my previous company, it brings different thoughts and different challenges and things. So I'm going to hopefully bring some of those into the conversation together.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much, Melanie. How about yourself, Dipti?
Hi everyone, thank you for having me here today. So my name is Dipti, my pronouns are she, her, and I identify as a cisgender bisexual woman. My background is Indian. I was born in the UK, university educated, and I work for an engineering company called Jacobs. Which are also a Stonewall top 100 employer. And I'm a graduate project manager, so I have moved around the engineering industry quite a bit in the last couple of years. Currently, I'm seconded onto the HST program, and I'm also a very proud member and champion of our LGBTQ plus employee network called Prism. And yeah, so in Prism, we are advocating and trying to trying to drive change in everything ED&I. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dipti. And we're definitely going to speak to the incredible work that Prism are doing in Jacobs a little later. So I'm looking forward to that. Malis, how about yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Dylan, for hosting us. So my name is Melis Chikalu. I use she and her pronouns. I'm currently based in Cote d'Ivoire, West Africa. So for those who need a visual description, I'm a Black cisgender woman. I have Black Afro hair. I'm wearing a asymmetric white shirt thing, and I'm sitting in what looks like a bird cage, but it's actually a chair, and there's a white wall in the background. What I do on the day-to-day is I'm a transformational coach and consultant, and I've spent the last kind of 10 years working at the intersection of creative and mental health industries, curating experiences and conversations with leaders and businesses that promote well-being, authenticity in the workplace as a competitive advantage. But I'm also the program director at We Create Space. And if you don't know about us, then we're a global nonprofit platform, a community and collective of queer change makers on a mission really to improve the lives of LGBTQ plus people around the world. And we just do this by, connecting communities and allies with tools, knowledge, and support network for personal growth, self-care, queer leadership, and many other things. So yeah, really great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us, Melis. And I was at We Create Space's Pride opening party last week, which was phenomenal. So thank you to you and the team for arranging that. Simon, how about you?
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all, albeit virtually from my living room. It's very surreal. My name's Simon Johnson. I'm the chief executive of a sports governing body, so Tennis Wales. So Wimbledon just around the corner. Make sure you all tune in, please. Be very much appreciated. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a gay man. And really, I think, from a sporting background, I've grown up working in sort of sports, hospitality, the leisure sector, and just seeing how important representation is in that sector for the LGBT community, where often they're highly underrepresented. So I'm really keen to join the panel, listen to all the discussion about what's happening in the private sector, public sector, third sector, and see what we can all learn. So thank you for having me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. And I guess that's what today's really about, right? Bringing our voices, perspectives together, connecting, knowledge sharing, and seeing what each of us are doing and how we can learn from one another. So thank you. I'm going to dive right in with the very first question, which I guess is the bedrock of this session. And my question is, why does representation matter, right? And how has your access to it, or lack thereof perhaps, impacted your own journey? And I know, Dipti, you wanted to share with us your story. So perhaps I can come to you first.
Yeah, sure. So, representation and the access to representation is very, very important for me. So I'll give you a bit of a background to what it was like when I was growing up and my career journey and how representation has really influenced my career so far. So I am a daughter to immigrant parents, so I am a second generation migrant, and growing up, I was always told that I must remember that I am brown and I am a female. So the world isn't really made for people like me. I grew up around the Indian community in Leicester, and homophobia and transphobia and biphobia were very prominent within the community when I was in school, and there was no representation at all as I was growing up. I remember being told that I will already stand out, whether it's in a lecture room, a lab, or a meeting room. So I just need to ensure that I don't do anything else that will make me different. I was told that I should not be so ambitious either, because the world isn't very accepting for people like me. And I was always encouraged to try and fit in and also lower the expectations I had in myself. So when I came to realize that I was bisexual and throwing that into the mix, that was a whole new ball game for me. And I had a lot of internalized homophobia. I swore by it and I kept it to myself, and I never ever really wanted to come out because I just did not want to put myself out there, because I saw other people get outed and witnessed everything that they had to experience, and it was awful. And I completely ran away from who I was and my sexuality for a very, very long time. And I think that is mainly because there was no representation growing up. Even when I went to university, I stuck to my guns and decided that I still wasn't going to be who I wanted to be. I was very stubborn with that whole aspect. And I think over the last 10 years, I have really seen a change towards the LGBTQ plus community. I started seeing more people coming out and hearing more positive stories, which really did help. So as I saw representation increasing and there being more acceptance and more education, it was slowly becoming a more safer place for me. So that's when, at the age of 23, I decided to come out to very, very close friends. Before I was working at Jacobs, I worked for a few other companies as an intern. And when I started my professional career, I was only out to close friends. And one of my best friends, he's also Indian and he identifies as a gay man. And his advice to me was never speak about your sexuality at work. It's just something you don't do. And I fully believed that. I didn't question it at all because I hadn't seen any representation where I was working from the community. But all the companies I had worked for stated that equality, diversity, and inclusion is important to them, and it's at the forefront of everything that they do. And that's when I started to question, why are people like me told to be silent then? I didn't feel comfortable bringing my whole self into work, and I did not see anyone else speaking openly and freely about these issues either. I felt like the corporate world was just painting a pretty picture, and it was just a matter of ticking boxes for them at that point. And that's when I really decided to challenge that. And I was at the stage where I was looking for graduate schemes and applying to different employers. And this is when I made a very bold move and decided I'm not just going to let them interview me, but I'm also going to interview my future employer and make sure that it is right for me. And I wanted to work for a company that aligned with my values, and I needed to see more representation, basically. And in engineering, there is a massive drive towards ED&I, especially with getting more women in. But I also focused on the whole LGBTQ plus aspect, and I just wanted to make sure, is ED&I really at the forefront of everything they do, or is it just sticking a pride flag in their logo in June and pinkwashing, or are they doing more than that all year round, not just in June? And then I found Jacobs. I landed a job at Jacobs, and being part of the employee network has been so beneficial for me because this is where I saw a diversity in representation. So we have the LGBTQ plus employee network, but we have plenty more as well, representing different groups. And having access to employee networks such as Prism has led me into building a safe space around me, making friends, learning new things by hearing about other people's journey, because everyone's journey is unique as well. And this is where intersectionality fits in really well as well. And when there is a lack of representation in the workplace, work just feels like work, and a job over time you can really lose motivation sometimes, because not every single day is going to be a positive day, and there are going to be days or even weeks where things are just not going well. But having an employee network there and seeing role models and representation really did change the culture. And being part of the employee network and being involved in so much as well also helped me in my personal journey with identity. So I hesitantly became a member because I wasn't quite sure what I was signing up to. But ever since I've had that support from the workplace, I was able to come out to almost everyone I knew. That was a massive step for me in the right direction, and I never thought I'd be there. And this is all due to positive representation. But I think the thing I really wanted to highlight was it's great when you have representation, but we really need to have a culture where we focus on allyship and advocates as well, because I think representation will only arise when we have that support from everyone around us. So that's been my personal journey with access to representation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dipti, for sharing your journey. And again, we could talk all afternoon just unpacking that, because I think so much of what you said will resonate with so many of us. And it really is about finding that community. Jyoti, in a previous panel earlier on today, was speaking to exactly that. Finding your community and knowing that you can go to them and have that support. It's so critical to what we need as LGBTQ people, right? Would anyone like to add or build on or speak to what Dipti has shared with us?
Some organisations, they say this, bring your whole self to work, but actually it's your whole corporate self. And I often am quite cynical about, this bring your whole self to work thing, because as long as it fits, if you in their corporate way, they're quite happy about it. But maybe if you don't fit you're gender fluid, or you don't fit the organisation, then you can almost feel not represented. So kind of representation does matter, but where do you get that? If you've not got anybody to look to, and she was saying how fortunate you were to join a company with an ERG, but there's so many companies out there that haven't got an employee network or somewhere where somebody can go. My company, I'm the only person that's visibly out, and I haven't got anyone to look up to in the company. So how do I do that? Where do I look to?
No, I was just letting the conversation breathe. I don't necessarily want to center my voice. Simon or Melis, did you have anything that you'd like to add? If not, that's okay too.
No, I can certainly resonate. And I've worked in the largest hotel company in the world, and there's employee network groups and these opportunities to come together. But even then, sometimes it doesn't feel quite right for everybody. It's a bit of a one size fits all. It's organized in a certain way by one person, and it's perhaps not as organic as just a conversation like this can sometimes be. But I also run a pretty small organization now myself. We employ less than 20 people, but we represent hundreds of thousands of people who play our sport. And we're trying to figure out some of those opportunities to bring people together, to network in a really informal, safe, collaborative way that isn't rules and regulations and policies and tick boxing. We've done it, great, job done, we'll wait till next June now. That is more just introducing people to create their own networks, and people we feel might get on well because they've got similar lived experiences. So I can certainly resonate, Melanie, with what you just said. And I think I often look for role models and people outside of my organization, outside of my sector, that I can sort of relate to, because I might have read something or have seen something in the news that I find quite interesting. I think it doesn't necessarily need to be as close as, oh, this person's in my company, or in my case, doesn't have to be a tennis player. You know, there's lots at the moment around, you know, gay footballers and opportunities there to come out now. I think that's really important. And, you know, business is worldwide, it's everywhere. Hopefully we've all got people we can look up to moving forwards as this becomes a very normal conversation.
Absolutely, thank you. And Melis, not to put you on the spot, but I'm curious to know, you know, do you feel as though you have had access to representation, you know, as you've progressed on your journey, or?
No, no. And I think most of the time, and I was on another event today, and I had to reflect on, you know, my work journey, and in most experiences, I was, you know, the only, you know, Black person, the only Black and queer person, you know, in my workplace. And I think over the years, I've had to unpack a lot of the microaggressions, the tokenism that kind of ensued on the back of that, of sometimes being seen as this unicorn, and objectified in certain ways. And it's been a hard journey, but I think for me now, I have to appreciate that the challenges that came on the back of that have allowed me to be a very well resourced person, and having had to require and to seek out community in a very deep way, you know, just beyond, you know, the labels itself. It became about seeking out humanity in other folks, and really connecting with people's lived experiences. As we know, even as queer folks, our experiences vary, and we have to allow the spaces as well to learn from.
Well, I think Melis has frozen. Right. Melis, we seem to have lost Melis, but that's okay. Hopefully we will get her back. So I'll move on to the next question, as it were. You know, as champions, advocates, leaders yourselves, my question is, what are you doing differently then to ensure that there is meaningful LGBTQ plus representation? And perhaps I can come to you, Melanie, and you can share your thoughts and your experience in how you're doing this. Welcome back, Melis.
Thank you, Dylan. Yeah, as I just said, I kind of joined a new company since sort of February, and I kind of went through that process of, you know, I'll shape how people react with me. People don't know me. There was very few people I knew in this business, and so, you know, do I come out to people? Do I, you know, be my authentic self, or, you know, how do I represent myself, and how do I show up at work? And I guess one of the things that has really empowered me is, after leading a Pride network, that really gave me the tools to be confident enough to come out when I changed roles. So when I joined my previous company, you know, it was the last thing that ever crossed my mind was to be out and proud. And it took me a long time to get there. And I just decided when I was joining this company that, like you said, Dipsy, you know, I'm going to just be out there, and I'm just going to be myself, and, you know, and just authentic. And then start on the back of that, just starting challenging those people in HR, those people, those senior leaders, and actually saying, you know, what are we doing? And got the feedback, you know, well, we're not doing a huge amount. And that was, you know, something that resonates with probably a lot of companies is, well, you know, it's not that we don't think it's right, we just don't know where to start. And so one of the things that I've been doing is, we have a Teams channel that's global. So I've just been posting things on there. I posted stuff about Ramadan. I posted stuff about mental health awareness. I wanted to keep it balanced, just generally about all sorts of different things. So when I introduced the LGBTQI stuff about Pride or whatever, it was coming from a balanced place. So it helped people just interpret it. And we have, you know, people all over the world. So I was very conscious that in some countries it might not be, you know, that some of the conversations might not be accepted. You know, people might have different views about it, but I wanted to make sure that I kind of people listened, and so. But what was really interesting was a couple of weeks ago, I was nominated as a Pink News business role model, and I posted it on my LinkedIn. And next minute, one of the VPs in work said, "We'd like you to join a global what's the word I'm looking for, webinar, and we want you to talk about, you know, why you've been nominated as a business role model." And I was a bit taken aback, but I was like, well, this is my time. This is my chance to take this opportunity. And I think we all need to take those little opportunities. And maybe it's a big one, maybe it's a little one, but it was because I posted on there and then I posted on my LinkedIn that I got this opportunity. And so I talked about what I'd done in the other networks and things. And one of the things that came out of that conversation was people wanted to understand. So somebody just pinged me just this minute about doing a session for Pride Month about understanding the rainbow. And I think they were talking about in one of the other sessions that people don't understand what LGBT looks like, what those challenges are. So actually, I'm going to do some myth busting. I'm going to also do a bit of a presentation about you know, some of the challenges that people from different orientations and identities experience, and why it's important to have that conversation in work. So it is little tiny like little steps, but you know, those little steps, you almost have to put yourself out there. You know, you have to make yourself vulnerable. But when you make yourself vulnerable, when you do show up, that's when those doors open, and that's when that conversation really starts. So I just challenge everyone, you know, to be vulnerable. You know, it is uncomfortable. Nobody likes it, but it's amazing what happens when you put yourself in that space.
Thank you, Melanie. And I think that speaks to a point that Pip Spence discussed earlier on today, that positive agitation. Be that positive agitator within your organization. So go out there, challenge and question. Go and have those conversations with HR like you did, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be something grand and impressive that requires a great deal of resources. It's literally just asking the questions that need to be asked and challenging the right people to make that change.
Yeah, exactly. And you're surprised what might happen, you know, what you find when you start doing that. You know, people are interested, you know, you forming affinity groups. Maybe it's just helping getting involved in some DE&I training that they want to do. You know, there's lots of different things we can do. But like I say, it's about those little steps. And you don't, unless you start agitating, unless you start asking those questions, using your, you know, your little network of people, bring it up in your team meeting. Say it's Pride Month, you know, and just share something. You know, you don't have to be standing from the rooftops and doing something right across your organization. You just do it in your little team.
Absolutely. Thank you. Dipti, I have a question for you. Have you felt being a part of PRISM, your LGBTQ ERG at Jacobs, do you think that has had an impact in terms of representation within Jacobs?
Definitely. I think sometimes the employee networks can host events as well, which can be rolled out for the entire company. So before I became a member, I had just heard about there being an employee network, and my line manager at the time, before a team meeting, we always have like a slide, which is either related to health and safety or just a culture, we call it culture of care moment. And I think it was International Pronouns Day or something. And my line manager used that safety culture of care slide to talk about pronouns and the importance of pronouns, and just seeing my line manager being an ally encouraged me to go and join an employee network, the LGBTQ plus employee network, and it definitely does initiate lots of conversations, even outside the employee network. So any manager or any other colleague I speak to in the company outside the employee network will ask me about PRISM, if they've seen something or heard something, and that will initiate a conversation. So I think having these networks in place, such as PRISM, and having these virtual events that are rolled out, is definitely making a difference, because it is initiating curiosity, getting people to ask more questions, and also it's also a good resource for employees who want to learn more as well. So yeah, I have worked in companies before which are probably the same size as Jacobs, but there hasn't been an employee network. So I have seen a massive difference in culture as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Simon, if I could come to you, you are you are the top leader, the CEO of your organization. What is your approach to ensuring that there is meaningful representation within your own organization, or perhaps within organizations that are part of your network, etc.?
It's very daunting when you put it like that. I just had to take stock there.
Just putting you on the spot.
No one said that in a while to me. I'll have to think about that one. Well, look, Melody, I can certainly relate to something you mentioned earlier around putting yourself out there. I think I'm probably a little bit guilty of not having done that until I was in this role, and whether that makes me a better person, worse person, I'm not too sure. It's something else to reflect on, but it was certainly easier to have this conversation, to broker these types of conversations within sport when I was meeting with policy decision makers in government, members of parliament, members of Senate, local authorities that we work with on a sort of regular basis, to sort of see where their barometer was. Certainly within our staffing network, our player base, it's become normal. And my aspiration for my business, Tennis in Wales, is effectively that our business should be representative of the people that live and work in Wales, and that cuts across everything. In terms of protecting the Welsh language, which is a gorgeous language. If you ever hear it spoken, my Welsh language is very limited. In terms of the gender balance, we're very fortunate in tennis that we are we've had huge success over the years with female role models and international champions and equal prize money in those areas. But there's massive underrepresentation in other areas. And I think what I've tried to do is to lend my voice across all the areas of representation. Clearly, from an LGBT perspective, it's the area I can resonate closest with, right? Because I'm a gay male and I kind of have lived experience, but my lived experience won't be the same as everybody else's, even being a gay male. So I think just in a leadership role, being able to ask these questions that hopefully make it easier for other people to create networks, to write policy, to ask questions of you. And I think, Melanie, your point of making yourself, whether it's vulnerable or accessible or contactable, I think it's been really healthy. It's been fascinating for me to see how many people not have come out of the woodwork, because that's a terrible term necessarily to use, but have stepped forwards and said, that's really interesting. Didn't know you were gay. Me too. And it wasn't because there's any sort of eureka moment or flashing lights going off. It was just this kind of commonality that we had in common with other people. So I think I found that really, really valuable over the last sort of 6-8 months. I came out like 10 years ago, but just in this role, I think it's given me more of a platform to maybe ask some of those questions and make the conversation easier for other people, working, volunteering, playing in the sport. And hopefully it just gives a platform. And like I say, we want to give that platform to all areas of representation. And actually, it was great. I've come back from holiday this week. Today's my last day off. I'm sat at home just clearing emails, catching up on things. And we've got some phenomenal board members. And, some of the women on our board, are equally passionate about women's representation, where we see an equal number of women participating in tennis. But when it comes to working and volunteering in the sport, they're massively underrepresented. And there was a network event that they held today, actually bringing women together who are passionate about tennis and being in the sport. And it kind of leads me to think in all these spaces, just conversations like this that just normalize the whole topic, make it easy and comfortable for people. It's just a really healthy position to be in. And it's a no-brainer, right? Whether you want to grow a business or you want to grow a sport or you want to make your colleagues happier, healthier, if you can genuinely come to work, be happy, healthy, physically, mentally, financially, we're all better off for that. There is no downside. So it's a bit of a no-brainer. I guess my only regret is looking back and thinking, well, I could have done this like 10 years ago, but hopefully now it's never too late, and there's more of an opportunity for other people to come forward and do the same thing in their businesses, in their sector. It doesn't have to be sport, doesn't have to be corporate, it can be all sorts of sectors. We've all got the same issues, we're all people. There's some commonality what we're all talking about that I'm sure we can all take away.
Absolutely. And, I think that's such an important point to land, Simon, is that role that leaders, senior leaders really do play in all of this, right? It is that role modeling. It is being accessible, open, vulnerable, etc. Because as soon as people see leaders doing that, it kind of gives them permission to do so too, right? So thank you so much for sharing that. And as we do move on now to the conversation around role models, I guess I'd like to come to you, Melis, on this, because we often speak of role models and, we place them, at least there's a tendency to place them upon pedestals because they are those people we aspire to be more like. And often we lose sight of the fact that they're just as imperfect or as flawed as the rest of us, right? So I guess my question to you, Melis, is if you could distill the essence of being a role model, what would this be? And perhaps a very cheeky question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you consider yourself a role model?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for all of you who shared so far, and just picking up on what Simon was saying, it's a journey. Earlier on Simon said, oh, I don't know, me being in this role is kind of emphasized, this desire to create spaces, to be more accessible, to be reachable, to lean into that, role model element of it. And so I think it's important to highlight that it's a journey. And that to a certain extent, in my case, circumstances made it so that, I found myself in this position where I've had to tell my story. At the beginning, I think it was mostly around survival because I really needed people to hear me and part of my perspective so that we can find solutions. And those who heard me came forward and asked more questions. Others were probably just lost and didn't quite make sense of it. But it started up from that and eventually evolved into, this real role in itself where now people do come to me for suggestions. And because I advocate not only just around, identity, be the whole intersection of identities, but also how it plays out with mental health and with other challenges that individuals of, minority or who experience the minority experience in any way face. And so it's quite important to remember that there's humanity at the core of it. And that at some point, when we do realize that we have impact, we have the agency to choose how we navigate that. And it becomes a more conscious process where we can now target and visualize, this mission and where we see our voice having, a real impact and it mattering and making a difference. So in terms of essence, I think I would simply, call out that it starts with, a desire for change and leadership. And I always speak on leadership with a lowercase L, be it leadership of self or leadership of others, but this real desire to make space for new ideas, new perspectives, because it's Pride Month, and someone said to me recently, it's a time to listen with our hearts, and the fact that we're all kind of crossing paths at this point, celebrating, yes, but there's many journeys that are colliding at this junction point, and it's not just about this month; it's throughout the year. So how do we continue, making these conversations accessible and use our platform in a way that is, again, open to all? And for me, to your last question, Dylan, about me considering myself a role model, I mean, it's not a term that I really evolved with because, first of all, French is my native tongue, and so role model there's really not an equivalent for that. So I have to kind of think in two languages, and if it doesn't land, it doesn't land. But I do resonate more with, the idea of being a change maker, and someone who takes these opportunities quite seriously. And I do with that kind of ask to be met where I'm at. And also, as Melanie said, with my vulnerability and the fact that I too, even though I'm part of a community and many other marginalized communities, I don't have all of the answers. So it's really, as you said, not putting people on a pedestal, knowing that we can be seen, but there's also a time where we too need to step back and make others, priority to come forward so they can fill in those gaps, because we're all interconnected. And that's, the more voices we join up together, the better picture we have of this life and that we lead. And last thing, it's just this quote that came to mind, and it's from Yancey Ford, a filmmaker, that says, well, we cannot be a better society until we see that better society, and I cannot be in the world until I see that I am in the world. So it takes all of us, essentially.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Melis. And I think if there was a clapping emoji, I'd be using that kind of like pretty much throughout the session, throughout the day, in fact. But I love how you framed that in terms of self-leadership, and that kind of being a starting point, and recognizing that we are all on a journey. And that is exactly what it is. It's a journey. It's a practice, right? It's that willingness to begin that journey of growing our self-awareness and sharing that with others so they may learn, and we may learn. And so I just love that. So thank you. Did anybody else have thoughts on role models and anybody would want to speak to what Melis shared?
I don't think you set out to be a role model per se. It's something that somebody sees in you, so it's something that they admire. Maybe it's the way you live, maybe it's the way you act, maybe it's the way you dress, maybe it's something about your characteristics. Lots of people admire different aspects to them, to people. And so people have said, oh, I think you're a role model, but I haven't done anything that on purpose other than try and be authentic and be myself and live out my values. But if people appreciate those and they see that as role model behavior, then but I do stop and I think, what is it that people see? What does success look like? And everyone's version of success can be very different. We're often led to believe that to be a CEO or whatever else, or to be a manager is successful, or to be a certain a star, or be some kind of something that we traditionally think as being a successful career. But actually success can look differently to everybody. And I think we need to almost reassess what success is. And for me, success is someone that inspires other people to be the best version of themselves.
Yeah. Thank you, Melanie.
Yeah, if I may just add to what Melanie just said about, redefining success individually, that's so important, because in my work, I'm quite lucky to kind of go in various organizations and work with their queer leaders and work with their staff. And a lot of the times, and we hold queer leadership retreats actually, where people come and kind of unpack, the kind of work mask and those roles that we often find ourselves in, and just say, well, actually, who am I beyond that? And a lot of what comes up is that even those within our community who are put in positions of visibility and power sometimes have internalized very unhealthy ideals of success. And also maybe because of the collective trauma that we evolve within our community, there's a lot of behavior that we are having and learning to shed when it comes to authenticity, taking care of ourselves, having boundaries, maintaining, making sure that if we do share our trauma, it's not being utilized for other people's gain. And so there's a lot of conversations that we're finding we need to have with ourselves. And so I think it's so important what Melanie said. Ask yourself that question. You see something in someone, don't assume that it's so easily acquired. Some of us are more privileged to have access to support than others. And so really be kind to yourself wherever you're at, and know that whatever desire that is, it can be nurtured. And should these people be accessible, ask them, you know, how did you get here? You know, what can I do? And really allow for that journey to work, you know, for you, essentially.
Mm. Meet yourself where you're at, right? In your words, Melis. Thank you. So, you know, we've kind of alluded to a great deal of skills almost that we need to grow to become more impactful in our organizations and our communities. So I guess my question then is, you know, what steps can we take as queer leaders to grow those skills and develop as queer leaders, if that makes sense? I hope I'm being articulate.
I think one of the most defining points for me actually was, you know, I work in sport, and we have some fantastic role models now, like Tom Daly and the platform he's created to talk about LGBT issues worldwide in terms of where big international events go, sponsorship, corporates. From a tennis perspective, icons like Billie Jean King, who are just outstanding and been trailblazing for what feels like forever, I guess, for my lifetime. It probably is, bless her. But the one I resonated most with was actually someone like Tim Cook, and I hadn't really realized he was even gay until literally I was sat watching a TED talk in the morning, having my crunchy nut cornflakes, and it just got dropped into conversation as the most normal thing while he was talking about being the world's biggest company and the highest paid chief exec and all these other great achievements. And then it was almost like an AOB item. And I kind of really resonated with that. It wasn't a pride platform. It wasn't because he was a gay chief exec this special interview was taking place. It was just a part of who he was. And in his job, it's just one thing of consideration. And I really loved that. It was normalized. It just felt like the most natural conversation to be having. And how do you feel about being, the world's biggest CEO platform at the moment, but also you happen to be gay? And he's like, yeah, it's great, because I get to talk about it and, raise issues, and if we can give some money back, and that's our charity of choice for the AIDS research we do. It just felt the most normal thing ever. And I think that sometimes that gets missed, that, we have Pride Month, so events get put on for Pride Month. But actually that was just so normal. I just sat there over breakfast thinking, God, it is normal to be an LGBT person and have a job and have a career and do whatever job you want to do. And I think that's really, really powerful. And I'd like to think that everyone can kind of, relate to that sort of scenario that, growing up, I didn't see other LGBT people, certainly males working in sport, let alone playing sport. That's shifting now. But in every sector, I suspect there are those people. Now, someone like Tim has a great platform because it's Apple, right? But I suspect there's lots of great people out there, and it's just so normal for them to be an LGBT person now. We need to find those people and use them to help harness this conversation and just amplify it in the years ahead. And it'll just become so normal in future that, the sort of healthy work relationship we all have with our, our inner selves will just become, our day to day. It'll just be normalized, and that'll be a great place to be.
Mm. Thank you, Simon. Did anyone else have some thoughts? Melanie or Dipti? I see you both took yourself off mute.
I think I believe that we can keep growing and developing as queer leaders ourselves if we keep an open mind to learning. I think always being open to learn something new is a really good way to grow and develop those skills. I know I'm learning every single day, and I'll probably keep learning till the very end. I think just that on its own sometimes can actually get you very, very far. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to share about developing those skills as a leader. Like what Melis said earlier, I probably don't use the word role model either, but change maker. That phrase really sticks out to me. I think maybe being the change maker that you maybe wanted to see maybe 10 years ago or X amount of years ago. I think that's a very positive direction to go towards.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dipti.
I think I have to agree, not the nail on the head there, be the person that you would want to look up to. And for me, it's trust. Someone that's got integrity and trust is kind of those behaviors that I value in my leaders. Trust is not given, it's earned. So being respectful, being accountable, being positive are all these kind of behaviors that really resonate into building that integrity that I respect from my leaders, and something that I as personally want to reflect and try and put into my personality and how I shape myself as a leader.
And that's no easy journey, right? For a lot of us, is, I speak from my own experience here. It took me, and it is taking me, a very long time to figure out and have absolute clarity on what my guiding values are. This is not an easy question, right? Sure, you can spit out a couple well-meaning words, but they're empty and hollow unless you genuinely mean that and stand by those. And I think, as a queer leader, it's that value alignment within myself. So what I'm doing, what I'm saying, my actions, do they speak to those values? But also the people that I work alongside and the organizations or the spaces that I go into, it's also about those values and that alignment. And yeah, don't get it right all the time. It's a practice.
No, definitely. And I think, but that's also a good thing, because people see that you're human, and it's okay to get it wrong. But I think that accountability that I said, about holding your hands up and saying, yeah, I made a mistake. We've seen in UK politics, and probably in politics in general, people that you admire and people that, because they'll apologize when they get it wrong, and there are those that just don't apologize, and you lose respect for them.
Some of the most difficult words to say, right? I'm sorry, I was wrong.
Exactly. But they're those kind of qualities that resonate with people. They're those kind of things where creating that safe space, and often you have to create that safe space yourself. I made a mistake. It's tough to say that. To actually own something, be it in your day job, doesn't matter about being a leader or whatever else. When you make a mistake, just owning it. Because that says a lot about you. I guess it comes back to being vulnerable again. We're going around in circles, but that's good.
And back to Dipti's point too, about having that openness to learn, to understand that there are other perspectives to your own, and not get defensive, because that's kind of a go-to emotional reaction, right? Is to get defensive, and defensiveness just brings with it that whole shutting down, that closedness, if that's a word, isn't helpful to yourself or anybody.
That's it. So you might have got someone's pronouns wrong, but it's, if you correct and you move on, and you consciously make sure that you try not to make that mistake again, then you're showing willing, and that person then feels so much better about it. But if you negate that person's pronouns, as we're just talking about, that you're then showing disrespect. You're not moving on. You're not learning. So and that's in every part of our lives. But it is a learning journey, isn't it? I think we all need to be open. We all say things wrong. Things keep changing. We never get it right. We can't know everything. Even in our own community, things are changing. Every day is a school day.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So we have 5 minutes left, and I think I just would like to take these last few moments with you all here to hear from each of you what idea or challenge or reflection you would like to leave our delegates with? So if I can maybe start with you, Simon, what would you like to leave everybody with?
I think just the thought process really of how you can help make, whether it's your colleagues or even just social circles, people feel more comfortable around these types of conversations, create spaces, opportunities. I love Melanie's point earlier about just dropping in some of those things on Teams chats and groups and things just to raise awareness, and not necessarily just because they're LGBT issues. There could be other things in the world going on as well that are just, creates discussion. I think let's just normalize the discussion and help everybody, be true to themselves and ultimately live a happier life. So I think, creating the spaces where people can thrive would be a real success for us all.
Thank you, Simon. How about yourself, Dipti?
I think I'd like to say is sometimes just don't afraid to be bold. I think sometimes being bold is what is the most impactful thing you can do. I know it can be daunting to go into a new space if you don't have much representation to look up to and to really put it out there. But I think just making that first step to just be bold and put something out there, it's surprising how much of an impact it can actually have. And I think it's more likely to have a positive impact than necessarily a negative impact. So yeah, that's what I'd like to leave everyone with, is don't afraid to be bold.
I love that. Thank you. Malis?
I think for me, it's just always going back to, that core of really looking after ourselves. I mean, I bang on about this all the time, and I'm all about mental health, but I think a lot is being asked of us. I mean, in our positions throughout this month and beyond. For some of us, it started, in April, May, and we've just been, showing up and showing up and showing up and showing up. And I think it's important as well to remember that a big part of queer joy is found in our health, in our wellness, in us taking breaks, and also having that time to reflect, because I always make this an intentional piece to understand how, what's changed in the communities that I navigate. And I'm fortunate enough to be in a different part of the world now and trying to understand, well, what pride means, for this space, but also for myself. How has my journey, evolved, and what is the story I now want to tell? And I think sometimes we can find ourselves in a repeat mode where we're saying the same things. And as leaders, our stories have to evolve. And when we learn, we have to integrate that learning and share it. And so it takes time to connect with ourselves to formulate those. So yeah, look after yourselves, be bold indeed, but also being bold is about knowing your boundaries and knowing when to say no.
Thank you, Malis. And Melanie?
I guess it's advocate for others. You don't have to come out and be loud and proud. You can just share somebody else's story. Even if it's about some intersectional thing, it doesn't have to be about LGBT. It just might be the experiences of something. So somebody the other week said to me, they mentioned a blacklist and whitelist, and I challenged them and said, no, it's a allow list and block list. If it's oppressing the Black community by mentioning this and having these stereotypes. So it's being an advocate for everyone, not just yourself. And I think once you start doing that in small steps, and in maybe something that you feel a bit more comfortable about, then you start maybe talking about things that you're less comfortable about. So, but just educate yourself and, like I say, advocate for others.
Thank you so much, Malis, Melanie, Simon, and Dipti. It's really been an honor to spend this hour with you. Unfortunately, that is our time up. But thank you so much for bringing your perspectives and your voices. And yes, I hope you have a restful evening, or at least the evenings that you need. Take care, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dylan. Thanks, Melanie, Simon, Dickie.